Hi, everyone. I see a number of folks logging on. I see Sandro join in. Hi, everyone. We're going to give it about 1 minute for folks to get a little bit more of a quorum here, and then we'll get to going.
Just popping in to say hi. You guys are running the show.
Nice seeing your face.
All right, everyone. I am going to kick us off, and we're going to have more people joining in. So hello, everyone. Welcome. We're doing another event here at Project FoundED. Now, as I see names filling up, I can see a lot of our community members in here, but I'm also seeing some names that are not familiar. So I wanted to introduce us. I'm Sophie from Project FoundED. We also have Sandro here hidden now, but he is our executive director and I manage all of our community. To let you know who we are a community of EdTech founders, and we believe that technology's role is to deliver equitable learning outcomes for all learners. So we're really here to close the student achievement gap, and we believe strongly that tech and EdTech is a part of that equation. We want to support founders in the delivery of that goal. And our community is complementary for founders. It includes a Slack group. We run events like this. We have a resources section, including a investor list of over 300 investors specifically for EdTech founders. Check us out at projectfounded.org. Join if you're a founder, or follow along if you're another player in the ecosystem. We'd love to get to know you. Today is a super special, exciting event. So we have Leone Consulting Group, yes, and this event is on community and community building with educators and in the EdTech space. Now, as a community manager, I will be taking notes along with this because there's a lot of good tidbits. So we're so happy to have them. And just to let you know about structure, they will be speaking for about 30 minutes. You can put in questions as you go, and then for the last 15, taking some questions. But from here, I'll pass it on to Lana and Porter to introduce themselves. Thanks, ladies.
Yay, we're so excited to be here. I think Porter's going to be bringing up some visuals for you all, but just a quick clarification too, because we're doing this presentation with the eye of educators in mind, but all of the tactics are appropriate for any really type of stakeholder. Because you are who you are, we will be diving in and getting nerdy with education. But we use the term educators broadly, right? So if you are a brand that is with instructional coaches versus a preschool educator, they are different, and we'll talk about those nuances. But just so you know, we also work with brands to foster communities of parents when we're making and moving the needle when we think about equity in education as well. So I will kick it off to Porter to get us started.
Hi, guys. I'm Porter. It's so nice to meet you. I taught special education in South Carolina for 8 years before leaving the classroom to help build and implement alternate assessment for kids with significant disabilities. And then through that work, I discovered that I really am passionate about helping teachers connect with one another. And so that started my community journey, where I worked at Discovery Education and was over the operations, the day-to-day operations of the Den, which is one of the largest, most active communities of educators, probably worldwide. And I did that for several years, and now I continue to help brands learn about community and help them implement community for themselves.
Yeah, and hi everyone, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ilana. I run a company called Leone Consulting Group. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit about it at the end, but basically we are a marketing agency, we just work with education brands, and we focus on organic social media marketing, building communities, a lot of what Porter is going to talk to you about today, and then building content that your audience truly values and helps them in their day-to-day challenges. I think, like Porter, I have a love for community, and you'll see that passion, you know, as we go through with me and Porter. We love talking about this stuff. We believe community is the only way to authentically engage educators and to really help them. We all started companies to help. Like, we didn't go into education for the money. We all had this passion trying to solve some challenge. So we help you tap back into that if you maybe have found yourself away from that. And then we also help you connect to people that need your services the most in an authentic way. So I believe in the power of community, was an EdCamp founder back in the day of unconferences and education. They still have those going under Digital Promise. And I came from the wonderful world of Edutopia, where I ran their communities and social media spaces.
All right, I love seeing your hellos and introductions in the chat. Please keep those coming. But let's move on. As I told you, I was a classroom teacher, and once a teacher, sort of always a teacher. So our first thing is, okay, class, I would love you to retrieve, if you have it, a piece of paper and a writing utensil. If you don't have that, you can use a Google Doc or your phone or anything to take just a moment for us to do a KWL chart. And I'm holding up a picture of one, and there's also on the screen a more fancy one, but this will give you an instructional strategy for the day, and that is a KWL chart. Teachers do this with students all the time. What do you know? What do you want to know? And what did you learn? And so right now, I want to give you the opportunity to think for a moment of, what do you think you already know about community? And then I want you to also fill out, what do you wonder about the topic of community? And you're going to have 2.5 to 3 minutes to brainstorm this for a second while I am quiet, which doesn't happen often, but you're going to have 2 minutes of Porter being quiet while you write down a couple of things of, what do you think you already know about community, and what do you wonder about community? And we'll come back to what you learned. And so I'm going to be quiet now. This is your 1 minute warning. Okay, so that will give you something to think about later when we come back through at the end. I'm going to ask you to write down a few things that you've learned. I hope that you will take the section about, what do you wonder, and feel free to, once we give you our contact information, reach out to me. I probably won't answer all of your questions today, but I would love to help you. So if you have things that you wonder, then feel free to reach out. So today, what we're going to cover, whether you have a community now or are thinking about launching one, this session is going to help you lay a solid foundation about, I don't want to underestimate this, the hard work of building and nurturing a community. So what we're going to cover today are some groundwork things. We're going to learn the difference between engagement, audience, actually network I've added into this. We are going to define some primary purposes that brands or companies have for building their communities. And then we're going to visualize, I'm going to show you the community life cycle and give you things that you will want to do at each stage along your journey. So let's start at the very beginning, and that is, what is a community? And a lot of people come to us and say they want to build a community. They want, but as we talk to them, they'll want more people to see their posts and interact with them on social media, which isn't really what community is. That is another term that we're going to talk about. So let's get into some definitions. And I'll go through these fairly quickly because they are less relevant to me than when we get into the meat of community. So your audience. Your audience is a group of people that you talk to and who are listening to you. And so members, and that could be at any platform. So members of your audience have the potential to become community members. They are your group of folks, but they aren't the same. And we are going to I'll send these slides, but we have a blog post. Ilana might be copying and pasting it right now into the chat for you. I'm not sure, but we have a blog post that helps you differentiate between all of these words and what community really means. Engagement, people talk a lot about engagement, and it's one of the metrics that marketers, Ilana is an amazing marketer. It's one of the metrics that marketers constantly measure. How many people clicked on something? How many comments or likes did a post get? How many views were on a video? Each little action that a person takes on a post or a page, that's an engagement. That's how we define an engagement. And it's a small or sometimes larger commitment. There are all of these things involve a commitment. Just liking something, hitting that like button, that is a small commitment, the tiniest commitment. With some brands that we work with, we measure even the the quality of an engagement by how much of a commitment it requires. So there are lower quality engagements. A like is less quality than a comment or a share, for example. Then there are folks, this is a term that people confuse with community, and that is a network. And I just want to say there's nothing wrong with networks. Networks are great. It is connections that you have with people. I think that LinkedIn or Twitter are really great examples of networks. But the differentiator for me between a network and a community has to do with whether people care for one another, whether they have feelings of fellowship, whether they feel like they have joint ownership or liability. So most brands have an audience that has a potential to become a community, and that can be built through community engagement. But meaningful community engagement is only experienced by members, not your organization. You help facilitate that. So an online community is a group of people who have developed relationships around a strong common interest. And no matter what we do as a brand, if they don't interact with each other, if they don't develop relationships with each other, or they don't have a strong common interest or care for one another, it's not a community. So here are one of my heroes in the community space is Carrie Melissa Jones. She's also a community scientist. And she had this wonderful community terminology where in one place you can look at what is community, what is an online community, what is a brand community, and that is a community that is supported by a company or an organization, a brand community. And then there are mirage communities, and those are probably, network is probably a synonym for that. Is they are groups of people who interact with one another or interconnected with one another, but they don't care about the well-being or connect appropriately with one another. So now you're able to define the difference between engagement, audience, community, and network. But one more note about this, because they are all interrelated. Communities do work best for existing audiences. So you start with your audience. Communities then, they don't create the interest, they actually capitalize on that interest.
And Porter, just really quickly, as you were
ahead.
thinking it through, I think as all of you are EdTech founders, we're not saying you all need a community. So we want you to recognize the difference between all of these and say, which of these right now am I positioned to grow? And or what does it take to truly grow a community, and what type of community would be most aligned with my audience needs and my organizational needs too. But I don't want you to think when we're done with this presentation that you automatically need to have a community. So I want you to think about your organizational needs first and foremost, but you need to have the fundamentals of what a community actually is to do so.
I 100% agree with that. I would just like to add, like, I don't actually believe, and I think that's what Elon is saying, that everybody needs a community. And I am obsessed with community, but not everybody is on their journey at the same place. Some of you need to build an audience. Like, that should be your focus. It's not to build a community. Everybody's needs are different. And there is, to do community right, there is such a commitment to it that some organizations don't have the capabilities to tackle that in the way that I would want it done. And so I don't always encourage everybody to run out and build a community, but why should you? Let's talk about why you should. So building a community around your brand is the best way to build deeper relationships with your customers. If that's what you are trying to accomplish, building deeper relationships, then I would say put community on your roadmap. So I would love to know where you are in your journey. Do you have a community? Something that you might call a community? You can drop that in the comments if you'd like. And then I'm going to keep going, but I would love to hear whether you have a community started or not. We're going to talk about the cycle of community, but I want to start with the primary reasons that organizations create communities. I use the spaces model. This comes from CMX, where I received my formal training. And this is called the spaces model. So as we go through these, and I'm going to go through each one of these one by one, give you an example of a company that uses that type of purpose. But I'm going to ask you some probing questions that I'm going to circle back to after we're done going over these. So here are the questions that I'm going to ask you as I go through each of the spaces model. What do you think is the primary purpose? And you don't have to memorize these because I'll prompt you again. But what do you think is, as I go through these, the primary purpose? I will ask you to think about one of these and think about which most closely aligns with what you hope to accomplish. You might even consider which of these can you say is not a priority for you. And then a fourth question to consider is, are there any of these that you hope your community might be focused on as it matures? Because I have seen communities as they mature touch all of these primary purposes for a community. So now let's go look at some examples of them, and you'll see the definition as well. So some brands build communities to make it easier for their users to get technical help, and that is a customer support community. Members answer questions and solve problems for each other. You've probably come across a tech support or help forum. This is the type of community that when people talk about return on investment, this is the easiest to calculate that, because they do this thing where they're like questions answered within the community versus the staff time involved in answering questions. Because what happens here is people put their questions or they go search for answers to their questions. And so this makes it easy to calculate a return on investment. So
I think I would also say,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Porter. I would just also say
No.
that this type of community is one of the most popular communities in EdTech. And it is also the default. So say you set up a Facebook group. I saw someone in the comments saying they have a Facebook group that they started. They're not sure it's a community. If you don't tell the community what you're hoping and they don't tell you, and you're not aligned in programming and you're not co-creating the community with them with a goal in mind, they'll automatically default to this community. Customer support. I need help with this. This button's not working, and so on.
This is the default. A lot of times, so some of you are brand new in your community journey. We'll talk about there's a label for where you are along that path. There are people who have a Facebook group that resembles a community, but it's actually a mirage community because it has basically defaulted to this. There's no direction for it. What you can do in those circumstances, so imagine you have this Facebook group, but it's sort of purposeless, is you come in as the brand and you begin to add things that help set the purpose for the community. You direct that purpose, hopefully by listening closely to your community. So that is a support community. The next is a product feedback and innovation community. And we don't see this very often as the primary purpose for a community. We do see communities as they mature having parts of it where they are gathering product feedback and innovation. The one that comes to mind, and this is the example that I have here, is Lego ideas, where members upload new Lego builds, and then they comment, react, and upvote new projects. And so that is, and there are a few other examples of product feedback type communities, but this is the best example of it. And I feel like it's only part of what Lego does with their community as well, so it's probably not even their primary purpose. In the same vein, the Den, which is the community that I had the pleasure of being part of for about a decade, started as an acquisition and advocacy community. And so I want you to be careful not to confuse this with an affiliate referral program, even though they are closely related. This is an invitation, and I think somebody's already mentioned that they have an ambassador program. So an invitation to brand ambassadorship can be really fun for members while it's novel, or if it distinguishes them in some way within like an inner circle, but by itself, ambassadorships rarely result in authentic community. In this case, the Den created a network of ambassadors, but added so much additional support and success and created the environment of community that it has been successful. It has matured to have other features, including that product ideation and feedback, the support. Brand ambassadorship, I'll just mention this to those of you who are doing this do know that it comes with both a give and a take. So you'll see that in this example. DENSTAR educators receive this, and there's a list, and DENSTAR educators commit to doing this. So that is your acquisition and advocacy. Ilana and I were talking earlier. The simplest way to explain this is current users or current customers, current purchasers, whatever that audience segment is, being empowered to connect with one another and share with new potential users, customers, whatever that equal audience is. So it's empowering them to share on your behalf.
Yeah,
Content
and I think if I'm
go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Porter.
No.
I would say as a marketer, when we think about acquisition, we think about new customers. And so the way Porter's framed it is key. You're not building a community for new customers. You're building a community to empower your current customers to then tell the story, tell their impact, to then bring on new customers. So it's a indirect funnel, if you will. But I actually got confused, and we got into a long, not debate, but conversation on what is really acquisition. So I wanted to just double click on that for you all. Is acquisition is not a community full of new customers, and it's about brand awareness and bringing them in that funnel. It's talking to your current customers and empowering them.
So there's a great question in the Q&A of what's the main value for a community member in the acquisition advocacy community. And I will just say that in general, and this changes, but in general, the main value for them is connecting them to other I'm going to say users, but y'all know who your customer base is, who you're talking to. So it could be a purchaser, but it is connecting them to each other so that they have successes together. And so much more. I mean, there are other benefits, but the main thing is the connections with each other. Okay, so I see, Camille, that your community contributes content organically. So a content contribution community increase it. If you are looking for content, this is YouTube. YouTube has content creation communities. There's Teachable, I think, may have one as well, where the people who are creating the content, that's who you're building community with. And so Duolingo is a really great example of that. An engagement community. Ilana was talking about how you may have a community for new customers, that more brand awareness type community. That's what this E is all about. Is in this example, PBL Works has built their community on Facebook groups to engage customers and potential customers around the topic of project-based learning. So the conversations don't have to be specifically about the resources on PBL Works. And so that's a differentiator here from all of the other types of communities that I've talked about, the other purposes. Those purposes are almost always fully related to your brand. But in an engagement community, it's related to your topic, the topic that you are focused on, and you are willing in this engagement model to say, it's okay if there are potential competitors mentioned in my community. Okay,
yeah,
so
I see this
about
as
Go ahead, Ilana.
I'm sorry, there's a delay, Porter. I would just say that this type of community is a huge opportunity in EdTech. I don't see it done properly or executed well. People have the tendency to create engagement communities, and then things aren't moving quickly, or they haven't really understood what they're trying to do. So then they start selling stuff. and they ruin the community. But we all, every single one of you, are passionate about certain topics in education. Imagine if you could bring stakeholders together to truly collaborate and help move the needle in it. Your product can be mentioned if organically, but do not make it about your product. This can be a very powerful type of community that I don't see really rarely used effectively in EdTech.
Agreed. I mean, PBL Works is doing this. And there are other engagement communities, but it's few. Elon is absolutely right. Okay, so there was a question teeing me up for, can a company have a hybrid of the different types of community, or should you primarily focus on one type of community? So through this, I love you, whoever anonymous attendee is who wrote that. So I have two thoughts on this. One, I do think that as you are starting, you should choose a focus, but no, so focus on one, choose one, do it well. And then as your community matures, you can introduce the other priorities. So that's answer number one way. The second way is, I believe that the customer success community does incorporate many of the other types of community. So a customer success community connects customers with one another to share best practices, to drive usage, retention, product adoption, and customer expansion. So it can also have like that ambassador program built in to it. It has customer support built in, because in order for your customers to be successful, they need to have the support they need. And so by far the most common community type we see in the EdTech industry right now are the success focused communities. All right, so now, Ilana, do you have something?
I think, yeah, I mean, we were talking about, and I want you all to think about, okay, Porter just talked about customer success, but how does it truly differentiate from customer, the service, the support side of it too? So the difference here is really taking your customer on the journey of impact. It's not about your product, it's about what your product can ultimately do and the story around it, and the different clients, you know, the different customers, the different environments that you serve. It's taking them on that proactive journey, whereas customer support / customer service is really them a lot leading the charge. And it's like Porter said, it's about how to click the buttons. Here's this new feature, product specific. That's why Porter said that this customer success community is more of a hybrid, where you can do more and you can attract multiple buyers too, so or multiple stakeholders. So if you are Class Dojo, for example, and they're not doing this, but this is their teacher community, you can also do a success community for, maybe they have a district-wide sale and they're doing the B2B play. They can talk and have just a community for their district admins to talk about their successes and challenges on implementing district-wide and get others inspired to do so.
Okay, so here we are backing up to, here's the list of them again. Remember, you're going to get all of these slides. Use the chat if you'd like, but I'd love for you to think of which do you think is the primary purpose for the community that you are either building or want to build. Another way to think of that is, which do you think most closely aligns with what you hope to accomplish? So, or you can tell me which ones are not a priority. Like, I never see myself doing a contribution community. And then going back to that question of just know that there are some that your community might focus on as it matures. Now, I feel like I've already said this in a different way, but customer support and engagement are the most popular forms of community overall. So Cassandra, you want to know, should we only select one? You should try to prioritize one if you can. Of which one would only select, yeah, Ilana's got it, only select one to start. So in general, we see support and engagement being focused on the most. But in education, in EdTech, we see a lot of brands focusing on the success community, probably because it gives them a little more flexibility to do other things. But when we talk about what is the purpose of community, I just want to always remind you that ultimately the community serves to improve the lives of its members. And the only thing you will ever accomplish with community, when you start writing out KPIs and things like that, know that this is it. This is all community will ever do for you, is increase loyalty. Now, there's a whole bunch of things underneath increasing loyalty that come from that action. Like increasing loyalty will help you increase retention. It will increase product usage. It will increase your repeat purchases. It can help you generate new sales leads and reduce your marketing costs. It can reduce your customer support costs, improve your product through the feedback that you get, and even help you recruit super users to become employees. Community isn't, in marketing terms, community isn't like ads that give immediate gratification. Notice that I'm like, it will increase loyalty, which may lead to these other things. It's not like an ad that's going to give you immediate gratification. Community takes a long time. It's a commitment to building a long-term relationship with your customers or users. I'll pause there.
I would say, Porter, it is the #1 way to bring your mission to life. Is, you know, you talk a lot about community empowering others to improve their lives. It is the #1 way, and we are all mission driven in some way, being in education. It is that. On top of that, it's the #1 way to differentiate your brand from other direct competitors. And when I think about M&A and acquisitions and buyouts, like a great community will be the differentiating factor of someone purchasing you versus somebody else. Not that you do community for that, but I've definitely seen it increase the attractiveness of companies.
Okay, so very quickly, I highly recommend, if you are going to be in the world of community, that you consider reading this book by Richard Millington called Buzzing Communities. And I want to briefly talk to you about the community life cycle. So there are 4 stages to the community life cycle, and each stage is separated from the next by 3 factors. There is growth and how that growth is happening, the activity within the community, and the sense of community. And there are activities or actions that you take as the brand owner, the community builder, at each of these stages of community. So we have from inception to mitosis, and I will go through like what each of those look like with you briefly and what you do. So at every part of the life cycle, we have to water and nurture our garden that we are growing. And we start at inception. And I'll just say that this is the hard part. This is the part that so many people want to skip because it is unglamorous. It is unsexy. The results are uncertain, and progress moves a lot slower than we want. I am building a community right now that is in the inception phase, and it is painful. The members who are invited in the beginning are so important, and you have to create this feeling amongst them. So unless a small active group is established, it is impossible to grow into a successful long-term community. So these are the activities that you'll do to cultivate a small number of highly active members. How long do you think that you might stay in the inception phase? And that is reaching critical mass. So critical mass is when, like, you're not having to do all the invitations anymore. People are inviting others to your community. The majority of the conversations aren't driven by just you. So that's critical mass. How long do you think it takes? Okay, so I see a 6 month. Oh, look at the 2 years. That's excellent. All right. I love that y'all have good perspective on this. 1 to 9. So how many users? So it has to do, I'm going to back up so that y'all see this. Let's stick around here. So inception to establishment, when your growth, when 50% of it or more is generated by the members, so they're the ones saying, oh, come be a part of this. When the activity is 50 to 90% of it is coming from them, that's when you've reached critical mass, when it's not all driven by you. So I saw it's not about how many users, it's more about a percentage of users and their activity. I've seen anything from a month to 3 years. And what I will tell you, I'll give you the answer. Let me advance to where we are. It's anywhere from 1 to 9 months, maybe to a year. If members don't invite others to join or initiate activity after about a year's time without direct prompts, know that this is a sign that your community concepts or your tactics are wrong. In the establishment phase, yes, the establishment phase can last a really long time though. So if you're doing these sorts of activities, you might be somewhere in between an inception and establishment stage. So are you creating content about your community? Are you organizing regular events and activities? Are you beginning to stimulate that sense of community where people feel a sense of belonging with one another? That can help you move. If you start doing some of those types of activities, that can help you move into the establishment phase if you're forward thinking about it that way. Then we reach maturity, and I don't feel like any of y'all are at maturity, but I just want to say that more than 90% of your growth will be member generated here. Your activity will be member generated. You will see a sense of community present and growing there, and this will last years. And I'm not going to talk about the things to do at that phase because I don't feel like y'all are there. But I will mention that this last phase, which is just a brand new beginning, is to say that there is a stage called mitosis. And I want to make sure that you know that just as not all plants need to be divided, not all communities will reach mitosis. Cassandra has asked a great question about 1 time per month organizing events. It will depend on what your community's thirst is for events. Oh, I love you. Thanks, Ilana. You just answered it for me. So in the mitosis stage, sometimes a community is almost self-sustaining and comes to the point where it actually needs to break apart a bit. And if that naturally happens, you find yourself back at that inception phase with multiple communities. So let's say that you started with a community that had purchasers and users in the same place because they were an advocacy community perchance. And what you realize is that their needs weren't being met by being together. And so in time, so then the teachers or whoever might be the users say, oh, we have different needs. Or the purchasers say, we have different needs. And then you're able to help them meet that through mitosis and starting over. Final slide before I let y'all go. Go ahead, Ilana. Okay. Final advice for y'all is, I actually have one more slide, but while there is no single pathway to building a thriving community, my best advice is to start small You'll be better able to make mistakes and learn from them. You will learn about your community and they will get to know your brand. So if you've been building this community and it's really small, but people care about each other and you've been doing this for a year, don't judge yourself harshly for that. Start small, let them get to know your brand, imperfections and all. This is the opportunity for you to be more transparent. And if you start small, you can be more intentional about what you create. And my final thing I'd like to say is, if you enter into the world of community building, know that your purpose really is to help. This will help you be successful, to help people become who they want to be by listening to them. And then taking actions related to their needs and what you as a company are capable of doing. So we covered today the differences between engagement, audience, networks, and community. We talked about the primary purposes people create communities. And then we took a quick look at the community life cycle and things that people do at each of those stages. I invite you to think about what did you learn today and add that to your KWL chart. And then I'm open to questions, or Ilana, if you want to talk about us getting it right from the start, let's do that.
Yeah, and anyone that needs to jump off, we just thank you for your time. We love talking about this. Find us on Twitter. We're at Leone Group. We talk about community. We blog about it a lot. We also blog about the power of organic social media and doing it in an authentic way. But what Porter and I talk about as it relates to organic social media, building community, and even creating great content is this magic in the middle. You always want to look at what are your strategic business objectives right now, and then short-term and long-term. How does that match with your company capabilities? Am I going to invest more in community? How much do I need to invest in more? How am I going to invest more in social media? Whatever it may be. But never, ever forget your member needs. And we also talk about all the different ways that you can have signals to understand your member needs. You can do things like polls, surveys, really just looking at word clouds of what are they talking about, all of these things to really understand, are you meeting their needs? Because if you're over in your business objectives and not with member needs, you're doing it wrong and your community will fail. And then, just thank you all for your time. This is a little bit about us. You will get the recording. I know Sophie's going to give this to you and the slide deck. Please reach out to us. We do this for lots of education organizations. We're happy to have an exploratory call with you. On the next slide, we also talk about just what our process is to work through. I think ultimately what Porter is talking about is how do we create a proven framework that's personalized for your own business and then your audience's needs too. Getting that magic in the middle right, so then you can fly and start building your community in a way that you don't trip, it's good to trip intentionally and learn as you will, but you don't make big mistakes that hurt your brand reputation and, really just spend lots of money that you don't really need to. Do it right, do it strategically. So that's all. Thank you all so very much. We always love talking about this. Find us on the Twitters and anywhere else so we can nerd out with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you, Porter, Ilana. So good. So appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.